Big round of applause to Who Dat fans everywhere, Who Dat Nation. Fan base spoke loudly. Ownership responded on Monday. So where do we go from here? Well, next thing up is the Atlanta game. Normally we'd just be talking X's and O's, but I think it's much deeper than that. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. I don't know if anybody saw this. I caught wind of it. Today's Thursday afternoon. Might have been this morning or last night on Twitter. It was a reference to Albert Breer article on SportsIllustrated.com about the whole changing of the guard, so to speak, when Da was fired, and some circumstances that led up to it, and a little bit about the Lattimore trade had already happened prior to this article, also. But in there was a little, and I'm actually going to read it. Two paragraphs in there that while he was working on this article that he came across, and he was talking specifically about Miss Gale firing Dennis Allen. And what he wrote was, decision was driven very much by ownership, with Gail Benson reaching a breaking point with the team struggles over the past few weeks. GM Mickey Loomis, I'm told, or told to Breer, I'm told, didn't want to pull the plug on Allen yet. But Benson and her group was hearing from the fan base, that's us, in a way that they hadn't before, and their resolve was strengthened through that, to the point where a perception inside the building holds that Allen might have been fired on Monday morning, even if he had beaten Carolina. When I read that, that blew me away, because we made our voices heard, and I think it was loud and clear. But typically, you wouldn't expect ownership, to make decisions based on what the fan base wants. Because speaking as a fan, so I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think I'm pretty close to going, hey, we can be pretty fickle at times. We can probably be a little emotional, again, speaking for myself, but possibly for the fan base, be a little emotional on the point of irrational, exceptionally, or especially when you've the Carolina loss would be a great example. If it was, we were 2-0 and had that same game play out on week 3, we'd have been losing our minds right then and there. But our reaction after 7 weeks of that 7th game in a row when that happened, well, then I think our reaction was completely justified. So we were loud and vocal about it, and she heard, and she and her team, which I'm assuming is Dennis Laucher and other advisors, reacted quite quickly. And I think it was acknowledged by Darren Rizzi in the introductory press conference Monday, whatever you want to call it. And I'll have this directly quote him. I paraphrase it a little bit, but he said, "Look, the fan base is smart, and they know good football, and they knew they weren't seeing it." So before we move into the nuts and bolts of the upcoming Atlanta game on Sunday, I felt like this really needed to be addressed because it's important. You see a lot of fan bases who are in the same shape we're in, and you know what they're doing? The same old that they've been doing the whole time. And Lord knows we know we've been doing the same old over too far of a stretch. And I think we got loud, vocal, borderline, lack of a better phrase, totally about ready to lose our shit. And finally got picked up on, recognized, and acted upon. And I mean, if you stop and think about it, there was really not only the firing of Dennis Allen, but it looks like, speaking of the Lattimore trade and possibly some subsequent moves they've made since then, there may be a focus more into, look, we got to clean out the cap, something I was calling for very early in this whole process. Clean out the cap. Let's start now, see what we can do. And then as far as the interim coach, I am not talking about long-term head coach, but as far as the interim coach, you brought in a guy to stabilize the locker room and try to move this culture that was deteriorating. It was rotting. It really was. Try to get rid of that right, get everybody back together on the same page in the same locker room and everything, moving forward behind a leader. And even if that leader is temporary, I don't think we've had a unified locker room or a team moving behind the leader, considering who the leader was. And I'm about to go through some examples already. You see the difference between a guy coming in and trying to be accountable, hold people accountable, figure out what the problems are, and make some changes, and doing it in a couple of days. Whereas that's fresh and new because it seems like anytime we wanted to make a change, it took a year for us to even figure out what the problem was and to do anything about it. And even then, it felt kind of half assed. I don't know how long this feeling's going to hold, but at least we've got about 2, 3 days of not feeling that anymore and more of no, somebody's finally trying to do something about the bad stuff. So before we get into the actual game that's going to be happening on Sunday, what I was just alluding to is Darren Rizzi, and as I'm recording this, they probably had their second practice. I haven't seen anything on it today on Thursday, but really two press conferences. One that was introduced, one after their first practice on Wednesday. And he talked about on Monday, look, we've got a lot of work talking just about the coaching staff because they weren't going to see the players till Wednesday effectively. Identifying problems and start trying to make changes where we can. He's basically saying, look, and I think he actually said it at some point, what we've been doing hasn't been working. We need to figure out new ways. So right off the bat, apparently, on yesterday's press conference, one of the things he acknowledged is they changed the whole layout of the locker room. I was brought up and asked about in the media, and at first I'm like, yeah, who cares? What does it matter? But what he specified was that they rearranged everything so the position groups are now all together in their locker area. So he's basically saying, look, they go to a meeting, they're going as a group. They're going to have the meeting, they're going to come back as a group. If they've got to talk about stuff and figure stuff out, they're all together as a group to go ahead and do it. And I went, oh, communication, because we know that's been an issue. And not only from front office to coaching to players, but we have it, especially the last few weeks, have seen numerous examples where the communication was awful. 2 seconds before the ball snapped, and it didn't matter if we were on offense or defense, you could see there was something wrong and something bad was going to happen immediately. Well, we're trying to fix it. And a simple fix. Hey, let's get all the receivers together in one side of the locker room and all the linemen and all the D linemen. I don't know if it's going to work. It seems so simplistic. You're like, no, that'll never work, but who knows? The next one he talked about yesterday, and this one got me slightly aggravated when I heard it. It's on the subject of the soft tissue injuries that we have just been getting decimated with, going all the way back, technically to OTAs, because we've had a few happen there, but really in training camp and throughout the season. This came off because the media was invited to practice yesterday, and they mentioned, hey, when we were allowed in, you were already at a different part of practice than we always saw when we came in, was basically the question they were asking. So have you changed up the practice routine? And I think it was post stretching or something along the line specifically. I don't quite remember, but that was the gist of the question. And follow-up questions I get to this point. And he said, yes. And he was talking specifically about these injuries in soft tissue and going, we needed to do something different because what we were doing wasn't working. And we had to see, can we do something different that's going to improve the situation some? Now, DA at some point had mentioned that, but as far as I know, nothing was ever done. He's got the job 2 days. With the solution they came up with was, and this is where I went, oh my God, you have to be kidding me. He said, so we added an activation period. And I'm assuming the media gave him the same look. I was like, what the hell's an activation period? And he goes, Well, that's what they call it nowadays. He goes, I'm old school. I'm old school. I call it a warm up period. I went, well, yeah, yeah, I get the old school thing because 30 years ago, I'm playing high school football. And it was like, oh, yeah, we had a little warm up period before practice. We stretched, we practiced hard. Same thing before a game. We went out on the field, did our little warm up thing, not too soon after, came out, stretched, ready to go. I understand completely. I was assuming they were still doing it. According to him, as these questions and answers started going back and forth, it was voluntary. And he said, well, we made it mandatory. Not only did they make it mandatory, he was talking about, well, we've got our training staff and sports science people and whoever else involved out there while the players were doing this, because the idea is we want to get them warmed up. We want them getting sweating a little bit. I'm like, yeah, that's what you always did. It's like layup drills before a basketball game or, whatever. Every sport has some version of that. And it's before practice normally and before games. So they made it mandatory. They have the training staff basically and the medical staff working with them, trying to figure it out, trying to come up with something. So hey, you nice and loose. Then we're going to stretch, or you warmed up. Then we're going to stretch. Make sure you stay loose. You're ready to go. Then we're going to practice hard. And evidently they did practice hard because one thing Derek Carr said after practice yesterday, that was the most plays they had run in practice since he had been there. Yeah, so we're working them a little hard and trying to get more work done and more people. So again, I don't know if any of these changes are going to work and solve our issues, but at least he's trying and not continually going up to the podium as the same problems, whether it was self-inflicted stuff or injuries, which I'm reading into this. That may have also been self-inflicted in a weird sort of way because we weren't doing the right things from the jump. And eventually these players were going to get hurt at some point during practice in the game. Now, I don't know if they're going to work, but at least we're trying. And then this kind of goes back a little bit possibly to change in the locker room. This is what I did see this morning. I don't know when the interview was, but I believe it's Sharik Ishak on WDSU was interviewing James Hurst, who just retired right prior to the 2024 draft. So he pretty much knows of what he's speaking of. It was some point after the firing of Dennis Allen. And James Hurst basically was talking about a fractured locker room. And what he was saying was it started right after the Atlanta game last year where the shenanigans went on. Instead of the kneel down, we punch it in so Jamal Williams could get his touchdown. Now, I'm going to reiterate before I talk about what James Hurst comments were at the time. I don't like that happened or whatever, but what I was really upset about was two things. One, there was obviously a mutiny, which nobody had to confirm. We know there was a mutiny because the players did something the head coach said no when they asked him, hey, can we get Jamal? No, just kneel the ball. We're going to the locker room. That happens. He's visibly upset. Don't blame him. He had every right to be. But then he kind of throws the team under the bus with the whole apology stuff and the bullshit that went on in the post-game press conference at the time. That's what made me really angry. And I was ready to fire him right then and there because what I said was at the time, and subsequently a few times on this channel since then, is they were wrong. Privately, you needed to climb right up their behinds and chew them out and make it full certain known that was never ever going to happen again as long as you were the coach of the team. And if you had some bad apples in there and some bad actors, I think you did. Yeah, you got to go straight to the front office and they've got to work it out. I don't care what the situation is, but those guys got to go. All right. Fast forward now to James Hurst within the last few days talking about this and coming up with the kind of the exact. And look, he said we shouldn't have done it. But the feeling that he said was in the locker room the very next day, they were having some players were upset that the head coach publicly didn't have their backs. And Hurst even says, look, if you want to come in the locker room and read the riot act to us and chew us out for basically team-wide disobeying him, he goes, I get it, understand. We shouldn't have done it. Take take your ass chewing and move on. But no. So kind of saying this was a lingering effect. And he tells more to the story, but that's just basically the gist of it. And he suspects, and but he was just on the team less than a year ago before he retired. So maybe some players he's still close with talked even more, but kind of what he was alluding to, that it didn't take, if that locker room ever came together. Now, granted, he wasn't in it, but it wouldn't have taken much to fracture it. You think about what started happening week 3 and 4 and 5. And we've often complained the last few weeks about a lack of leadership and a lack of direction. There's one former player on record. I saw the video on Twitter, but I'm sure you can find it somewhere, that interview where he talks about it. And you can't help but watch it and infer and go, if the locker room wasn't fractured at the point he's talking about, actually, it had to have been. And at the time, I think a lot of people said that just with no visible proof. But that fracture probably started before that, I think, my opinion. And most people would concur. Also, it explains a lot because I have seen little blurbs here and there in some talking about how some of the locker room issues were coming out. And I had actually read and watched some videos referring to that beforehand. Then I saw that Hurst video and I went, it's kind of all starting to make sense a little bit. So what I need from Rizzi going forward at this point, we're seeing some changes implemented. Like I said earlier, I need to see him pull that team together, that fighting spirit that he was talking about earlier in the week, getting that installed. I'm thinking, I want to say, he didn't say it, but I want to say, get the loser mentality out of the organization. Start working on that culture shift now. You need it now. And what I really want to see is some guys coming out there and playing hard for the guy leading the ship, who at least this little bit, he's making some changes, trying to give him direction and saying, come on, guys, jump on board. Let's go. We're going to use this to build into whatever the rest of the season is going to be. And I think these are all important things. I don't want them tanking for a higher draft pick, because odds are the state of the way the team is now, as far as the roster management and physically, a lot of that's going to take care of itself. But I want to see him fighting hard. I don't want to see what we've seen the last few weeks. And we talked about this here. And maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't intentional, but just kind of at a certain point in all those games where we looked so bad, and it was kind of the blowouts or the crap that happened right at the end of Carolina that cost us that game, which it never should have been that close for it to happen, much less we actually lose it. But all that stuff that started happening, it's not going to be allowed to happen again. So we're going to have players checked in the whole, and I mean mentally as well as physically, checked into games the whole time, playing hard, trying to come back together. And even if it's just winning for each other or winning for Rizzi or whatever, get that back in and make sure the loser mentality doesn't show back up. And I think a big part of that, if you get that, I think some of these dumb, stupid, idiotic mistakes that we've been seeing lately, they come and go over the last 2.5 years. But they were fairly consistent over this losing streak and leading to stuff like Carolina beating us. See some of those go away. I think you're going to see better play just right then and there, despite whatever injuries we still have left, whatever roster limitations we still have left. And that's the stuff for the last 7 weeks I've been bitching, moaning, screaming, crying about, that I wanted to see. I think if Rizzi can instill that, and you can get some younger players on board, and you can empower, we talked about that, empower the leaders to lead this team. You can start now fixing the culture, even though a lot of these guys may not be here next year or the year after, but it's still important to do. And the ones you want to keep here, that you need to keep here and build your base around, you really want them to be here. And I think all that stuff can benefit you. I think it has to start now. You have to get it through the rest of this season, regardless of what the win-loss record actually becomes. And the offshoot of that is anybody who's not on board with that, can't do it or doesn't want to get involved or whatever. Those are the ones you're circling right now that you're saying they ain't coming back in 2025 if we can if we can get them off the roster. And then we'll have to figure out a way to get them get them off the roster because they ain't going to be coming back in 2025. Game breakdown. Normally, I would have a lot more than what I'm about ready to have for you. I think the important stuff, and I really do think this, the stuff that happened Monday to get us where we're at, the stuff that's happened since DA was fired and Rizzi was promoted to interim, to the point where we're going to kick the game off on Sunday. I think, in a weird sort of way, one of two things happen. Either we continue doing what we're doing, in which case we will finish this season 2-15 and definitely be picking in the top 3, and we're going to be miserable, and a lot of things still aren't going to get fixed, and they're probably going to get worse, especially as we were just talking about on the culture side of things. But if you can get all that turned around and headed in the right direction, we'll see what happens after that. It could be a week-to-week thing, really, because it's going to take a long time to undo all the rot that was done. And it accelerated so much over the last 7 weeks. But when you look at the team's numbers coming in right here, and this is the reason why a breakdown I find so hard, is I don't know which Saints team we're going to get. I feel confident to say we will not get the one in the first 2 weeks. I also feel confident to say I'm pretty sure we won't get the one that just went to Charlotte and embarrassed themselves. Where in the middle of that it's going to be, that's the real question. I don't even know where to start, how to try to figure that out. So it's almost like we reset and the baseline's back down to 0. And then after Sunday, we'll say, okay, is it more of the same old? Did we improve? Did we regress? What's going on here? And like I said a little while ago, I think that's going to be the week-to-week thing. I think that's what it's boiled down to, is we have to make changes in the short term, which we've already started, in the intermediate between now and the rest of the season, which is going to be part of, as the short term moves that way. And then what we're going to do in 2025 and beyond. So I think it's all kind of tied together. It all starts this week, but I don't know what the starting point on all this is going to be, I think, until they play the game. Now, if you look at the straight numbers, and you can kind of believe Atlanta's numbers, they're leading the division. They're a pretty good football team. But like, I'm looking at their total. I pulled their total offense numbers as of the end of week 9 going into week 10. In total offense, they're number 8. We're number 16. But how valid is that 16? I feel like we've played obviously worse than that number the last few weeks and living off the first 2 weeks. But what's the reality of where we really are? You start breaking down I've been around long enough to know the 5 that I put the most value in passing, with the Falcons at number 6, Saints at number 18. And you kind of go, yeah, we have enough information to know that's a legit number on the Falcons. And again, I'm looking at number 18 for the Saints going, really? We got our average up so much in those first 2 weeks. Then I think we had a couple in there. Like I think we were okay numbers wise week 3 or week 4 in the first Atlanta game, and maybe a few others here and there. But before I looked, I'm figuring out we've probably fallen into the 20s. We're close, but not quite there yet. Rushing Atlanta's, which this one keeps shocking me that their running game isn't better than what they're showing. It's number 18. We're number 13. And for the most part, we've had some terrible games in rushing, but we've had some really good ones. But for the most part, we're kind of hover from week to week sometimes, depending on who we're playing and who we have available and other circumstances. A little under where we want to be, and then way under where we want to be. And you're kind of at 13, you're almost middle of the NFL. And I'm like, that feels about right. Scoring, Atlanta, number 12, we're number 15. And that number doesn't surprise me because of the scoring we had in the first 2 weeks offensively. The 91 points has still got that skewed. But I did read the other day, to put it in perspective, that, and I'm sorry, we're number 15 in scoring, which is really the middle of the pack. But what skews that so much is somebody threw out there, we scored 11 touchdowns in the first two games and have scored our offensive touchdowns and have only scored a combined 11 cents. And I went, well, yeah, that number I totally believe without double checking it. Could be wrong, but I'm like, if it ain't, it's got to be close. So the last 7 weeks, our scoring's really coming down. Red zone, we're still number 5. They're number 13. Third down conversion, we're number 18. They're number 15. That all kind of feels like real numbers. Um, they've we we seem, if we can ever get down into the red zone, even in the last few weeks, we seem to be able to score off of it at a pretty consistent clip. So when you look at that, I'm like, none of our numbers are completely real. Some are close, but some you're looking and going like, being 15th in scoring. No, not lately. Um, so it's hard to sit there and look at that and go, I've watched this play so horrible. I know Atlanta, they play winning football. I guess is the best way you can describe it. Because when you're looking at their offense, you're going, man, that really stands out at you. But they win football games. And when you go to the defensive side, you kind of find the same thing. They're number 20 overall in total defense. We're number 28, which is totally believable that we have fell into the bottom 5 of the NFL based on what's been going on. Lord, um, I mean, we've all seen it. We know. And if there's any surprise, it's that we've only fallen to number 28 total defense. That number would have came up 30, 31 to 32, 30, number 32. I wouldn't have been surprised to find out we were dead last. Um, and just to go through our major stats, if it isn't in the bottom 5, it's close because we're number 27 in passing allowed. We're number 25 in rushing allowed. Right then and there, that's going to kill you. Number 26 in scoring. Remember, again, the first 3 games, we weren't giving up a lot of points. Even the Philly game we lost, we didn't give up a lot of points. At Atlanta, the touchdowns were the result of special teams and offense screw ups, nothing to do with the defense. So it puts in perspective how far down it came crashing. We still can keep people out the end zone and in red zone, the number 9, but we were running earlier in the year, even when things started breaking down on us, we were still top 5. That's going the wrong way. On third down conversion, we still let people convert on us, number 19. You flip over and look at Atlanta again, which we think is a truer number to measure the since week 1 until now. Number 20 overall defense, number 20 in passing allowed, number 23 in rushing allowed, number 20 in scoring, number 19 in red zone, number 29 on third down conversions. But yet somehow they play winning football. And even some of the games they lost early in the year, because I remember having this talk when we were gearing up to play that game in week 4, going, look, they've had some close calls and some games they won, some games they've had a chance to win. And even back then, I was like, I don't really know how they're doing it to stay in games. Well, they've won since then. They've taken over. They've all but locked up the division leads, barring some type of crazy collapse. If they can just go a little above 500 the rest of the way, they'll be fine. So I don't know where we're starting. Our starting point with a kind of reset in a way with the interim coach and trying to mentality. And I feel their numbers are real, but you look at it and go, you feel like where they are in their numbers, you're going, it should be a beatable team. But they won a lot of games. So the matchup, I think, here that's important. And honestly, look, again, I say I'm not too worried about the draft pick right now as much as I'm worried about fixing some things and not fixing them and see if the outcome of the game will take care of itself or if we can maybe not have a better outcome and a win, but a better just play a good football game and let the chips fall where they may because you've made your best effort because you tackled. because you didn't miss blocks, because you didn't commit stupid penalties on third down that kill a first down conversion. You don't commit stupid penalties that, after a third down conversion, allow the other team to get a first down by penalty and keep their drive going. We can go on and on. We all know what the symptoms were that we were watching during the game. Have you fixed any of those? You may not have cured the whole sickness in 3 or 4 days, but if we can treat some of the symptoms and get rid of them, the rest of it's going to follow suit. And we'll say this. Um, I'm not talking about injuries at this point because we'll have who we have at this point available for the game. And as long as whoever we have is on the field and giving us that effort, that a cleaner game of football than we've seen. Some of the stuff we were just talking about, the communications, no more blown coverages, no more blown blocking assignments. It's a long list that we've lived through the last 7 weeks, and start cleaning some of that up. Feel like that's progress as much as anything. The flip side of that is, normally I would say this would be a trap game for Atlanta. However, going back to the bullshit that went down in week 17 last year, look, I know it's a different coaching staff, but it's still the same ownership, pretty much the same front office, GM, leadership types, a lot of still the same players that are there. So I largely suspect they're going to roll in here, and it's not only not a trap game, but if they can roll us up and beat us 100-0, they're going to roll up and try to beat us 100-0. So I tell you this much, I don't think we have a chance of winning this game, and I don't know anybody who would reasonably pick the Saints to win this game. And it could be ugly as far as the score is concerned. I just don't want it to be ugly in the style of play. They roll in and beat us 45-10. I'm going to be pissed. Do not get me wrong. But as long as I can honestly say it's an improvement over the beatdowns we took the last few weeks to a pretty good football team who's more than likely going to win the division and be in the playoffs, I'll take what I can get at this point. Because it's not going to be a quick fix fixing this team. It's not going to be a quick fix fixing the culture. It's not going to happen in 1 week. But dear God, we've got to start somewhere, and I'm hoping it starts Sunday. Now, normally this would be the part of the video where I would have it in the chapters as outro, but we've got to make a little change in the second round of applause in this video. But this time it's specifically a round of applause and a giant thank you, a huge, massive thank you and round of applause, specifically to the 506 subscribers I have on this channel and the unsubscribed viewers who do keep coming back. Because, and I do mean minutes before I went into here to start recording this video, and this is Thursday afternoon, you probably won't see it till Friday morning. However, I got a notification from YouTube that you guys, with the subscriptions, with the thousands of hours of views I needed, has moved this channel into the YouTube, I believe they call it the AdSense program or something like that. But basically, two things have happened. One, I am monetized now. Thank you for that. And the second thing is, it does every stage of these that you get with more subscribers and more viewers, you get more ways to help grow your channel so you can get more subscribers and more viewers, which hopefully that benefits us all in the greater scheme of what we're trying to do here and build this community of Saints fans. Now, there will be a separate video at a later time because I do know some of these. I don't know them all, and I pretty much don't know how any of them work yet because they're literally getting turned on now. So once I have access to some of the newer stuff we can do, I'll figure it out. We'll implement it. We'll keep moving forward. But the biggest thing right now is again, thank you. None of this is possible without you guys, you gals, and your support. And an extra added caveat, because there have been a lot of suggestions from y'all. And like, it's part of the plan. There is a plan, but this is a great thing. I am not complaining about it. I'm loving every second from what I've already tell you. But my original plan is normally I started this in March, so 8 months or so ago. Normally, to get to this point, the average YouTube new channel, and we're a brand new channel, it's about 12 to 18 months. You guys have helped me do that in basically half the amount of time. My plan's getting sped up a little bit faster than I can get stuff done. I am going to catch up. Do not worry about that. And being as it's in season and we do have a lot going on, it's a lot of catching up to do because I do not want to fall behind on covering the Saints, having the commentary ready, and getting you guys and gals reaction to it. So give me a big thumbs up just because I can't do this without you. The thumbs up is actually for y'all because all 506 of y'all, and even like I said, the unsubscribed that keep coming back and watching some of the YouTube analytics. I don't necessarily know who you are specifically, but I can tell the same unsubscribe more or less. There's a large portion of you that keep coming back and watching videos, and thank you, thank you, everyone. So with that, we are definitely going live Sunday night. Um, I'll have probably going to be 9:30 Central again, so pretty much the same time. I'll have that up probably sometime Saturday to let you know for sure that we're going to stick with that time, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be sticking with that time. I have a lot to discuss then. I don't know the outcome of the game, but regardless of whatever happens in that game, it's going to be important. Also, as a caveat to this, the changes that started coming on Monday, and we talked about some today, just in the short term between now and Sunday, we're also going to start doing some videos, and I'll plan on those will probably be like that Tuesday, Wednesday midweek video. But we're going to start concentrating on some other stuff in the future. What needs to happen during the rest of this season in the front office, on the field, and what we need to do to get ready for 2025. Because the way this is outlaid, we're going to have a busy offseason because there's going to be a lot of crap going on that we're going to have to talk about, and that organization is going to have to recognize needs to be fixed and fixed. So we're all going to get a lot busier over the next few months, even though pretty sure we're not making the playoffs. It ain't going to matter. We're going to have a lot to talk about. So till I see Sunday night, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.